Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today where we are going to do a whole bunch of canning. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of recipes today. We're going to do a beef stew, a split pea soup, white bean soup, and a vegetable soup. And I've done a lot of the prep already this morning. I find it is so much easier when I'm planning on doing multiple recipes like this to do a few things. Print off all my recipes, get all of the prep done, and the prep looks like getting my jars washed, so my dishwasher is full of jars. In this case, I needed to soak some beans, I needed to cook split peas, do a bunch of chopping, and I just used my food processor with the dicing blade to do a lot of my chopping, which makes very short work of it. So we have onions, we have celery, we have carrots, I have potatoes over here, which of course I chopped by hand. The nice thing about doing prep work like this is before you get into canning, you can give your kitchen a good wash, a good scrub, get yourself all ready to go, and it's just less overwhelming and less mess altogether. So one of the fun things about pressure canning soup is you can mix and match ingredients and flavors as long as you follow some basic principles. So we'll run through that when we get into assembling these. So I'm hoping to do 14 quarts of each of these varieties of soup. That's what I accounted for when I did all of the prep work. So I'm going to get 14 jars out here. And I just realized I did not chop up my tomatoes. So I'm just going to set these jars back. So we're going to start by chopping up our tomatoes here. So this is almost the end of the tomatoes that came out of the high tunnel. Look at how pretty that one is. So this one's a black Crim tomato. But yeah, I have only a few left before I'm going to be done with the tomatoes, which is awesome. So we're going to chop up our tomatoes, just get them all diced up. And if you would like to peel your tomatoes, you absolutely can. The nice thing about canning soup, and I'll make sure I put the links to, number one, all the recipes, but also all of the guidelines for home canned soup. And but what's so cool about it is you can make up your own recipes, and as long as you have half of the ingredients are the solid, so you fill up your jar halfway with your solid ingredients and then you top the rest off with your liquid. So there's a few caveats in here. You don't want to use a ton of fat in your recipes. I might use a little bit of olive oil to do any frying or anything that I might want to do for my soups, but not adding extra fat. And then when it comes to processing times, you need to keep in mind the types of ingredients that you have. So in this case, I'm doing a vegetable soup, and I believe that the processing time for vegetable soup is 70 minutes, I think. I'll have to double check that. And then I'm also going to be doing some soups that have beans in them, and then also some that have meat for the beef stew. So I will be doing the processing time for the ingredient that's in my soup that has the longest processing time. So for meat, it's going to be 90 minutes, and I am canning all of these soups in quart jars. So 90 minutes at 15 pounds of pressure for my elevation. The nice thing about this is there's a ton of base recipes for all different kinds of soup online. I'm sure you have many of your own yourselves. And you can adjust the seasonings, so your herbs, your spices, your salt and pepper, all that kind of stuff, to your own taste preferences. So I'll be sharing with you today the way that we like these recipes done. And you might want to try them the way that I'm doing them the first time you do it if you're new to making soups. But if you want to play around with the seasonings, for instance, one of them calls for thyme, and if you don't like thyme, then you can omit the thyme or swap it out for a different herb. One thing I will say about herbs is I do personally find that it's best to use dried herbs when you are canning. Fresh herbs tend to get a little bit bitter when they're canned. And the dried herbs also have a little bit more of a concentrated flavor. So for instance, a teaspoon of dried herb is going to be much more significant in the actual amount of herb you're putting in there than if you were to put a teaspoon of fresh chopped herbs in there. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this one is just going to be a basic vegetable soup. And I may choose to just open up a jar of this and eat it as a vegetable soup or use it as a base for other soups that I might want to make. So something else that you can consider doing when you're doing fresh tomatoes in a recipe like this, because there's a lot of liquid in them, and this is a mix of tomatoes. If you're using paste tomatoes, they tend to have less water in them than if you're using slicer type or beefsteak type tomatoes. But what you could do is cut them and then let them drain for a little bit in your sink. I'm not going to worry about that today because I'm doing so many recipes and I want to get them all done today. So I'm not going to do that, but it might be something to consider. Even just cutting them, as you can see, there's lots of liquid and seed that's coming out here on my cutting board. It does tend to remove quite a bit of it. And as far as the sizes of the veggies when you're putting them in, that's also kind of based on your own preferences. One thing to keep in mind is when things are pressure canned, they are put through a pretty intense heat process, and some vegetables can go a little bit mushy when they're canned. So for instance, for potatoes, I do fairly large chunks of potato in my stew rather than small. Whereas for the carrots, I actually have my carrots, let's see here, diced up like this because they don't tend to go as mushy in the canning as the potatoes do. So that's something else to keep in mind. Okay, I'm gonna get all these chopped up and then we'll start getting everything into jars. I find canning soups like this is kind of fun, and it looks really pretty in the jar. And outside of quite a bit of chopping for prep, it's pretty easy. Divide out our tomatoes between our jars here. We're going to add a teaspoon of salt to each jar, some pepper, 12 cups of cubed potatoes, so you're basically going to take your measurements and then divide them out over whatever size batch you're doing. So I'm doing a double batch here. So I need 12 cups total of my potatoes. So being a vegetable soup that is not going to have a lot of density to it, I'm going to fill this one up, these ones up more than halfway. Now we'll add some onion. A little bit of celery. And then we're going to top this off with some carrots. You could add some beans to this. You could add some corn to this if you like. So now we're going to top off these beautiful jars with water. You could use chicken broth if you like, or beef broth, veggie broth, anything like that. But these veggies are going to flavor this soup just perfectly. And we want to have an inch of headspace on here. So we most definitely want to debubble with a recipe like this because there's lots of room for air to get trapped in there. And I usually find I lose about a centimeter of headspace when I do this. So headspace is the space between your product and the lid of your jar. So now we're just topping back off so we have our headspace accurate. And we don't have anything sticky on here, so I'm not getting carried away with wiping down the rims. So I had a little bit of an issue with my microphone for the next 30 seconds or so of this video, so I'm just going to voice it over and share with you what I'm doing here. So I'm getting ready to do the beef stew, getting my clean jars, adding a teaspoon of salt and a little bit of pepper, pulling my beef out of the oven. So with my stew beef, the way that I like to brown it, I just like, you can put it in raw if you want, but I like to have it browned as I just roast it in the oven at 350 degrees until it is nice and brown. So now I'm just adding the beef into our jars, grabbing my funnel so I don't make a big mess of the edge or of the ring of the jar, adding in some of my cubed potatoes. And if I didn't mention, this recipe, it is out of the Ball Book of Home Preserving. Now some onion and some celery, just a little bit of celery. We don't like too much celery. And topping off with carrots, and then of course debubbling our jars. So I am actually preparing these ahead of time. And the way I get away with doing that is I put really hot water in these jars. I top them off with hot water so the jars stay warm. And then with my canners, when I'm switching them out and putting a new batch in, I dump the hot water out and add cold water and then bring everything up to temperature at the same time. And this allows me to get all my jars filled, even if they're not ready to go in the canner yet. So this next recipe I'm making is our white bean soup. And instead of adding diced garlic, I added around a half a tablespoon of granulated garlic. Now I'm adding in two what are those? Peppercorns and a little bit of parsley. These are our white beans, so these are navy beans. So I'm just adding our navy beans into our soup. And with this particular soup, I am only filling the jars around half full. And then I added in my ham and my carrots, a little bit of onion, and then I'm going to top this off with water and set these aside as well. Okay, we're on to our next batch here. This is the split pea soup, and I already have salt and pepper in each jar. So now I'm going to add some onions, and our canners are going back there, and we have our first batch is done and out of the canner there, or the 2 canners worth. Next one's in, and then I also have some apple pie filling, more apple pie filling. I did another batch yesterday and another batch just now. So I am going to turn on my camp stove outside and put my juicer, because I'm also going to do some juice with the cores and the skins of the apples. I'm going to have to chop more onion. And do those outside since my stove is going to be full for a long time now. This is the one disadvantage of pressure canners, is they take forever. Just like a very, very long time, because it takes time to get them up to the point that they're steaming. Then they need to steam for 10 minutes. Then you need to wait for the pressure to come up, which usually takes another 10 minutes. And then you set your timer, and then you have to cool them down. And this recipe is a 90-minute recipe. So we're looking at close to 3 hours to do an entire batch, start to finish, of something with long canning times like this one, which is 90 minutes. Definitely worth it to be able to have shelf-stable prepared meals on the shelves. So this recipe that I'm doing here is from the Bernardin website. And then we have our chopped ham here. Oh, burning. Oh. Forgot to put my goggles on. Oops, a little bit of celery. And carrots. And I cooked these with a couple of bay leaves, the split peas, just until they were soft. And we're going to take our bay leaves out. I'm also going to add a little splash of lemon juice because I really like the flavor of lemon in my split pea soup. So just around a tablespoon or so. And a pinch of thyme. So making pureed soups, you know how split pea soup is normally kind of really thick and smooth, is not recommended for the same reason that doing pumpkin pie or pumpkin puree or squash puree is not, just because it is difficult to be able to get a consistent like heat penetration when the product is so thick. But what you can do is, if you want that pureed texture, is do that, just puree it once you open up the jar. And debubble again, and then we'll set these aside. And I will be back with you to show you all of the finished products when we're done, which will probably be into this evening. We're gonna have quite a few jars by the end of today, which is gonna feel fantastic, and all just ready-made stuff. Pop open the jar, throw it in a pan, heat it up, and lunch or dinner is ready. So, love that. Friends, I am so excited to show you all of the jars that we ended up with. I think there's 82 or 83 jars here, and out of all of these jars, only one of them did not seal, and I can tell by looking at it why. There was some siphoning, and some of the liquid got in underneath the lid, and that's why I'm guessing that it didn't seal. So what I thought we could do is actually heat this up and try this. So this is the vegetable soup, so I'm just gonna throw it in a pot over there and heat it up. Look at all of those beautiful jars of canning. This thrills me to no end. So I'm going to show you what we have. So these jars are still a little bit dirty. I have to wash them before they go down to the pantry, but this is the split pea soup. We have apple pie filling, beef stew. So one of the things that you will find when you can meals like this is the liquid will likely drop down below the level of the food. And that is due to just the food absorbing some of that liquid. So don't worry about that if that happens. This is the soup that I'm most excited to try. The white bean and ham soup. I think it just looks really, really good. So you can see the colors dramatically change, of course, with the pressure canning, and they don't look quite as pretty as they did before they went in the pressure canner, but they still look pretty nice. So this one is the, what is this one? Vegetable soup, that's this one. And then I also did a couple of jars of apple juice. Look at the beautiful color of this apple juice. And I have my steam canner going back there, or not my steam canner, my steam juicer going back there with more of the cores and the skins from the apples that we made the apple pie filling with. I walked you through the process of making this apple pie filling in the video that I think came out before this one. So you can check that out if you want to see. So we did, the last canner went off at 10:30 last night. That's when I turned the heat down, and then I got up in the middle of the night to actually remove the jars from the canner. You don't want to leave your jars sitting in your canner overnight to cool off, because they can develop something called flat sour, which is where thermophilic bacteria, that's bacteria that thrives in heat, can start to thrive in those jars when they're kept at that nice warm temperature. It's the reason that you want to get your jars out of your canner as soon as you can and cooling off on the counter so they can cool down quickly and those bacteria don't have time to develop. Most of those bacteria aren't going to make you sick, but they are going to make your food taste sour. So that's why I had to get up in the middle of the night and pull them out of my canners. But I don't mind at all that it was so much work, because really it was only the 2 hours in the morning of all of the prep work and putting everything into the jars that took a lot of the time. The rest of the day was just spent kind of managing the pressure canners and emptying them out and putting the cold water in so that I could put the next batch in and so on. So I'm just so happy with all of these beautiful products to put on the pantry shelf. But let's go over here and heat up this soup. Move this out of the way a little bit so we can see. So yeah, I figure one jar not sealing. Oh, it actually is sealed. Well, so it actually is sealed. But I can push this down a little bit and all the other ones are completely concaved. So I am actually going to open this up anyway. And, oh, what the heck? Okay, so this is comical. This is the first time I think I may have ever done this in all my years of canning. I had two lids on this, and it was the top lid that wasn't fully sealed, of course. But this one is completely fine. So that means that I had 100% seal rate on all of these 82 or 83 jars that I have over there. So that's fantastic. But since I was really looking forward to trying this, and I do have some headspace issue with this one, I just think that's really fascinating that of all the jars, this one also has the headspace issue. So I don't know if it's connected with having both of those lids on there, and maybe the ring wasn't able to hold them down all the way, but needless to say, let's open this anyway. And it smells good, and put it in our pot here and crank on our heat. And we're going to heat up this soup and give it a try and see if it's good. It smells really good. These lids, these golden lids here, there is a canning jar brand that's called Golden Harvest. I think it's called Golden Harvest. I've never tried using their jars before, but they were half the price of the regular Bernardin jars that I normally buy. And so I thought that I would give them a try because I had a few more things that I needed to can. And so far, they have been just fine. I don't know if they're going to hold up over the long run, but the quality of the glass doesn't seem to be significantly less than my older Bernardin jars. So that's awesome. And that's what these lids are from, is from those, because when you buy canning jars, they generally come with lids as well. I don't mind having a little veggie soup for breakfast. So this is actually pretty thick. Let me show you. So you can see there's lots of veggies in that. I could see if I wanted to beef this up a little bit, I could open up a jar of kidney beans and throw some kidney beans in there, and maybe a jar of diced tomatoes as well, and make this a little bit more of a minestrone style soup. But I think it's going to taste good just like this. So if you are at all concerned about botulism with your home canned goods, one of the things that you can do as an added layer of protection is vigorously boil your canned products for 10 minutes, because the botulism spore itself isn't going to cause you any harm. It's the spore that it releases when it's in a low acid, oxygen free environment. But that spore will be killed with vigorous boiling for 10 minutes. So you can just always add that extra step in if you are at all worried about it. And then when it comes to things that you wouldn't normally boil, like a jam, a jelly, or a pickle, the acidity level is so high because of either the sugar or the vinegar that you use in both of those products that you don't have to worry about it at all. I have just a little bit left. Just these tomatoes here, a few more tomatoes down in the box underneath, a couple right there. And then just a few more, maybe 10 more apples that I'm actually going to be throwing into my steam juicer left. And then I am done preserving all of the food. And I am so excited because I did not have to do anything with green tomatoes. All of the tomatoes that came out of my high tunnel have ripened or will ripen in the next couple of days, which is fantastic. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Absolutely delicious. Really, really full of flavor, even just with the potatoes, the carrots, the onions. Did I even put any herbs in there? I don't even think I did. But it's really, really good. Friends, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed coming along with me, filling up my pantry shelves. I am so excited to share with you my pantry tour here in a couple of weeks, so stick around for that. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.